They're not going to foul. The Heat will let it play out. It's over. At last, the long wait is over. After 47 years, the Denver Nuggets can finally call themselves NBA champions.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Basketball in the Mountains. This is episode 63, and I'm your host, as always, Tyler King, here to talk all things basketball in the Mountain Time Zone. And today we're talking Denver Nuggets versus Oklahoma City Thunder, the first game of the season between these two teams. First of four meetings in the regular season, and if all goes to plan, hopefully, I think everybody in the basketball world, unless you're a fan of a different Western Conference team, is hoping to see these two teams meet again in the NBA playoffs, ideally in the Western Conference Finals, because it feels like these are the two best teams in the NBA, at least when they're fully healthy and all that. They do have the two best odds to win the NBA Finals pretty consistently. They have for the majority of the season here, despite being in the same conference. They're just two really, really good teams, and that was on full display on Sunday night at Ball Arena. I was there for the game, got some takeaways. I just every time I get a chance to see these two teams play in person, it's really, really special, dating back to multiple years ago when I first moved here and started covering and going to Nuggets games more often. So talk plenty about that. Also talk NBA All-Stars. The full All-Star reserves were revealed yesterday after the starters were announced earlier in January. I'll give my full picks for who my starters would have been. I know I went through this a couple weeks ago, or maybe a month or so ago at this point. Just kind of get who my starters would have been, or I think I went through my whole 12 in each conference at that point. But I got my full who my all-stars would be for this season. I feel pretty confident and comfortable with my picks, who I would pick for my all-stars. And then we'll give us some quick college hoops takeaways from the weekend. Got a chance to see the Buffs in action in person on Sunday afternoon. They finally snapped the 6-game losing streak, beating TCU pretty good in Boulder. So plenty of that to come later at the end of today's episode. But like I said, got to start with the Thunder and Nuggets game that took place last night. I'm recording this on Monday evening. Thunder win 121-111. They kind of controlled the game throughout. Even though both teams were down like a bunch of key players, obviously Nuggets are still missing three starters with Aaron Gordon, Christian Brown, and Cam Johnson all out. Sounds like actually a little bit of injury update. It sounds like the Nuggets are hopeful that Cam Johnson and Christian Brown will both be back before the All-Star break. But obviously with we talked about this last week on the podcast, but Aaron Gordon, the news that he will be out for quite a bit of time now, probably until the middle of March is when he'll be back. He re-aggravated that hamstring injury, and reporting last week said he'll be reevaluated in about 4 to 6 weeks. So we're still a month away from him even being reevaluated. So obviously the Thunder, without Jalen Williams, their second best player. They're missing some other key guys like Alex Caruso, AJ Mitchell, who's had an awesome season and could be up for NBA Most Improved award. So definitely a lot of both teams are pretty shorthanded going in this game. Although there were, I was on game story duty last night for the Denver Gazette, while my colleague Vinny Benedetto, who's been on the show a bunch of times, was covering Jamal Murray, in his first All-Star appearance, the announcement of that yesterday. So for as many regular starters that were out of the game combined between the two teams, there were just as many All-Stars on the court with Jokic and Murray, obviously for the Nuggets, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Chet Holmgren, who is also a first-time All-Star. That was announced yesterday too. He was on the floor as well. So 4 All-Stars and plenty of really, really good role players showcasing their talents, which I think was kind of the story of the game, to be honest. Maybe it's SGA, because he's SGA. He's the reigning MVP, and he kind of showed why he's probably still the favorite at this point, because not just because of the missed games for Jokic, just because of how good he is. Because if there are Nuggets fans that went to the game last night and haven't really watched the Thunder since the postseason last year, you're going to see a better version of SGA. And it was on full display last night. Like, it's not just 34 points. Like, yeah, he got to the free throw line 13 times, but he was super efficient. He only took he only made 1 3-pointer, and he only took 2. He was just really efficient when getting to the rim, making his mid-range shots. But he dished out 13 assists, which was a season high in the game. And a lot of them were to Cason Wallace, who was one of those the best role player in the game, who had 27 points, career high threes made. He made 7 of his 11 threes. I think he made 7 of his first 9 threes. Like, he was just knocking down shots really confidently. And he had a couple of big games against the Nuggets in the postseason last year. I remember writing about him after game 4 in Denver. He knocked down some big shots in that game. He was really good defensively in that series. He was pretty solidly defensively last night, as the Thunder did a pretty good job stymieing both Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray. Peyton Watson had a team-high 29 points on 17 shots, so pretty decent efficiency. He made 5 of 7 threes. Peyton was pretty on. But Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic only combined for 28 points in the game. Jamal was 4 of 16 from the field, 1 of 8 on threes. Obviously, it's great that he got his first All-Star nomination yesterday, and very, very well deserved. He's having an incredible season, but this is maybe his worst game of the season to date, even though he had 12 assists. He was doing a lot of him and Jokic are both doing a lot of playmaking. I think they combined for 20 assists in the game, but Thunder are doing a good job kind of making those guys spread it around on the floor and not letting those guys beat them, because Nikola Jokic only took 9 shots in the game, only 2 threes. He only got to the free throw line a couple times. He played over 29 minutes, and that's even with kind of the Nuggets waving the white flag near the end of the game. So he probably would have played close to 32 minutes, or maybe even over that, if it was kind of if the game went down to the wire and the Nuggets were able to keep it a little bit closer. But Thunder just kind of pulled away there in the third quarter with some good 3-point shooting. Not just Case and Wallace. Aaron Wiggins had a pretty solid game off the bench. Isaiah Joe had a couple of threes off the bench too. I thought the other Jalen Williams, the big Jalen Williams from Arkansas, had a pretty solid game as well, guarding Nikola Jokic. He was +7 in his 24 minutes as the backup 5 there. He actually played a little bit more than Isaiah Hartenstein, who made his return to the lineup. Similar to Nikola Jokic last week for the Thunder. He played just under 22 minutes in the game, but Jay Will, I thought, did a good job. Yeah, he's a guy that the Thunder have used in the past to really try and bother Nikola Jokic. He was kind of being really physical with him in that entire series, all 7 games last year. So that's a matchup that's going to continue. But like I said, I think SGA and Case and Wallace were obviously the 2 big takeaways from this game, because those 2 guys were just really, really awesome. And like I said, the Thunder, I picked the Nuggets to win the championship before the season. And I kind of maintain that I think the Nuggets, if they're fully healthy, should be the favorite to come out of the West, because I just think they're a better team than they were last year, point blank, and they were already so close to taking down the Thunder last year. But the Thunder are also a better team than last year, even though it is the same group of guys. Like, they really have not made any substantial additions or subtractions to their team. Like, they've obviously been dealing with injuries too. Jalen Williams has been out for the majority of this season. Although, having SGA and Chet healthy for the majority of the season is super helpful for them, because that's their best player and their best defensive player, one of the best defensive players in the NBA, and the MVP. So that certainly helps, and they've got a bunch of great role players. But like I said, they certainly have had their fair share of injury issues, like the Nuggets have so far this season. And I'm just looking forward to more matchups with this team between these 2 teams, because like I said, I think the Nuggets are better, and that's for a majority of reasons. Like, the roster is just simply better. Guys like Peyton Watson have taken a step forward. I mentioned how good he was last night, and the Nuggets really needed it, because he was kind of keeping them, even at arms, trying to keep them at arm's length for the majority of the game, because the Thunder had a hot shooting night from the start. They ended up shooting under 40% from 3 as a team, while the Nuggets were over 45%. But the Thunder took 13 more threes than the Nuggets did, and they were really hot early on in the game, especially in that first half, as they were able to build a lead. And then third quarter, SGA just kind of took over a little bit, and was able to help the Thunder pull away for a pretty nice win in the first meeting of these 2 teams this season. Like I said, they'll play again in OKC at the end of February, and then they'll play in OKC again in early March, and then actually the Nuggets' last home game of the season on April 10th, the penultimate game of the regular season for them, is home against the Thunder. So 3 more matchups between these 2 teams, and hopefully maybe 6 or 7 in the postseason down the road, because I think it's going to be I firmly believe these are the 2 best teams in the NBA. I think that was on display last night with despite all the injuries, just how deep these teams are, and how talented they are, 1 through 12, 1 through 13 on the rosters. Because even though there's some down nights for guys up and down on both sides, like even guys like Julian Strawther, I thought I'd play pretty well last night, and he got some more run because he was playing well. He was a +2 in his nearly 23 minutes. He had 9 points, knocked down a couple threes, had a couple rebounds, assists. He was just playing hard on both ends of the floor. So, and Julian Strawther's kind of been like it's going to be like the 10th or 11th guy on the Nuggets bench. Come playoff time, should they be fully healthy. So that just goes to show how good both these teams are. And the same goes for the OKC with guys like Kendrick Williams, who barely played against the Thunder in the playoffs last year. Isaiah Joe, who I mentioned, he's kind of had his minutes were kind of spotty in the postseason against the Nuggets last year. So both these teams are kind of an embarrassment of riches in terms of not just the coaching staffs and the talents there, but the skill sets on the court as well. So we'll move on from Nuggets Thunder because it is just a regular season game, and like I said, there were plenty of guys missing on each side, but I think it was just fascinating to see both those teams in action and see the Thunder kind of take it to the Nuggets because they have always gotten up for games in Denver. That's something I wrote about in the Denver Gazette today. Was just SGA has been a guy who has always played some of his best basketball of his career against the Nuggets, whether it was in the playoffs last year or in some regular season games. I remember, back in 2023, I think it was 6 months or so after the Nuggets won the championship, the first game the Thunder played in Denver that season, SGA, it was right before Christmas, hit a game winner on one of his patented, just kind of gets into the body of the defender, bumps off of him, and hits a mid-range jumper to win the game. I vividly remember that, and they celebrated that one pretty good. That was the first year they ended up making were the number one seed in the Western Conference, and that was kind of their big leap year as a team. And obviously, SGA's one of his big leap years as a player. So these two teams have always kind of the last couple of years now have really had some really great matchups between them, and obviously more to come, like I said. So move on to All-Stars. Like I said, I spoiled it already. Obviously, you know the news already as well. Jamal Murray, first time NBA All-Star in his 9th season, fully deserving, career high 25.5 points per game, averaging 7.5 rebounds per game, 7.5 assists per game, 4.5 rebounds. Turnovers, he's has taken care of the ball. He shot the ball really well from 3, nearly 44%. He's getting the line nearly 5 times a game and shooting 88% from there when he does get there. So super, super deserving. He was one of the first guys that wrote down when I got to my reserves here, just because I think the way he's carried the Nuggets through a lot of injuries, being super available. This is the healthiest he's been at any point in his career in the regular season, and it's clearly translated to some of the best basketball he's played of his entire career. He's had some of the highest highs any player can kind of have. In the postseason, which David Adelman made sure to mention before the game yesterday, the triple-double in the finals, just kind of all the stuff he did during the 2023 run. Obviously, the heroics he had with multiple 50-point games in the bubble playoffs, over 5 years ago at this point. So he's had a lot of highs, but he's had some lows throughout with some of the injuries and struggles he's had in the regular season. But this year, there's been none of that, and he's been by far the Nuggets. I think their most important player, just in terms of with Nikola Jokic missing 16 games and him being available for almost all of those and kind of gutting his way through it. He's played 45 games so far this season, and like I said, he's having the best and most productive year of his career. So he was fully deserving. And the other guy we got to shout out because he's in the Mountain Time Zone, Devin Booker is a 5-time NBA All-Star now. I know some people were not as convinced about Devin Booker as an All-Star, but I fully was, and I don't really care what anybody has to say about Devin Booker and trying to not disparage him, but just trying to kind of take away from this being more of a team thing for Phoenix, and I agree with that. Like what the coaching staff, and I've sung Jordan Knott's praises multiple times on this podcast over the last multiple months now. I think Jordan Knott should be one of the front runners to win the NBA Coach of the Year. But it is not just, the coaching staff and getting these guys to play hard and getting the most out of otherwise afterthought guys in the league. Like they're getting the most. This is probably the best season of Dylan Brooks' career, averaging over 20 points per game. He's been super important for them. Grayson Allen's had a great year. Colin Gillespie making a leap and being a starting caliber point guard in the league. The year Mark Williams has had at center, on and on. You go down the roster. Guys like Jamari Bouye, who I really like watching. Jordan Goodwin's been solid. Oso Ighodaro, Royce O'Neal, like all these guys that the Phoenix is getting production from. But none of it matters if Devin Booker isn't on the team. And I just think people underestimate that sometimes. And I think D-Book did have a little bit of a down year last year by his standards. And even this year, like he's averaging just 25.4 points per game, which is his lowest since 2017-18. Like, he's been consistently a guy that's scored 26 points or more per game up until last year when he was at 25.6. This year he's at 25.4, like I mentioned. But he's been pretty efficient this year, even if some of the shooting stats are not they don't jump off the page to you at all. But I still think Devin Booker is super, super important to this team. The playmaking has been really, really key. He's averaging over 6 assists per game for the third straight season. He's getting the line more than he ever has. Like I said, despite shooting 31% from three this year, he's taken a little bit of a backseat, like I said, at times this season. But I still think he's the big name star on a top 6 team in the West, and I still think the attention that he draws on a night-to-night basis when he's out there. Now he's been dealing with this ankle injury for a little bit, and he won't be playing again tomorrow night in Portland when the Suns are back in action. They lost to the Clippers on Sunday night as well, but. I think Devin Booker is an unquestioned all-star as well. He's another one of the first names I wrote down because I still don't think people are talking enough about how good Phoenix has been this year and just how good of a story it is. We're going to keep talking about it on this podcast. Hopefully I'm going to get some other people on in the coming weeks and months to talk about Phoenix, because they're going to be a playoff team, and we're going to be covering every single aspect of that once playoff time comes around too. So without further ado, let me just get into my full all-star picks here. Obviously starting in the West, I had 4 of the 5 starters that are starters I agreed with. I had SGA, Luka, Wembanyama, and Nikola Jokic, obviously. But I had Anthony Edwards over Steph Curry. Not really going to quibble at that one, but I think the Timberwolves are a little bit underrated, and Ant is the best player on that team. So I had Ant over Steph, and maybe that's unfair to Steph. He's had an awesome year, and some of the injury stuff lately with Jimmy Butler and all year. Golden State being where they are is not an indictment of Steph at all. But obviously, he's my top reserve. Then I wrote down Jamal Murray, Devin Booker, who I mentioned, Kevin Durant, Chet Holmgren, Alperen Şengün, and Kawhi Leonard. Those would be my 7 reserves for the Western Conference. So 2 differences between who my reserves are and who my All-Stars are, and who the NBA, who is actually the All-Stars. Denny Avdia and LeBron James got in those last 2 spots. I gave them to, like I said, Şengün and Kawhi Leonard. I don't really care if you want to put Avdia in over Şengün. I just kind of enjoy watching Şengün more. I think he's been more impactful to winning this year, even though I know the on-off stuff with Avdia. Portland's pretty bad without him, but I think a lot of his scoring stuff this year has come from free throws. And while that's an impressive skill to be a player that is able to get to the line a lot, I don't know. I'm just not the biggest Denny Avdia fan. So I'm wishing good. And I really don't think there's any case for LeBron as like to get in on merit. I think it's pretty crazy that Kawhi didn't get in, because Kawhi's been awesome this season and available as well. So I think he's just been better than LeBron in just about every aspect of the game this year. So that's pretty crazy to me. I'll get back to LeBron in a minute. Going over to the East. Again, I had 4 or 5 starters. I had Tyrese Maxey, Cade Cunningham, Donovan Mitchell, Jaylen Brown, and Giannis Antetokounmpo. Obviously, the one switch there is Jalen Brunson is a starter. I had Donovan Mitchell. Again, same thing with Ant and Steph. I don't really care too much. Like, I think either of those guys are worthy starters. I just think what Donovan Mitchell has done for Cleveland this year is super impressive. But if you want to go Brunson because they have a better record, and the Knicks have kind of been surging lately, that's probably perfectly fine. I probably made these picks a week or so ago, or at least for the starters. So I definitely could easily swap those. But so obviously Brunson's going to be my top reserve here. And then Scotty Barnes, Jalen Darryn, Jalen Johnson, Michael Porter Jr., Pascal Siakam, and Joel Embiid are my reserve picks in the Eastern Conference. I think Embiid and MPJ were the 2 guys I had in that did not make the All-Star game. Norm Powell from the Heat and Karl-Anthony Towns from the Knicks got in there over those 2 guys. But I think MPJ is super deserving. I think the leap he's made this year and just kind of taking way scaling up in terms of role, I think I did not see him being this kind of scorer and doing it so efficiently, and just kind of I got to see him play in person for the first time since he left Denver last week with the Nets in town. It was great to see MPJ, and he had a great night, 38 points, Still hasn't gotten to 40 points in his career, but it was funny after the game. Jamal Murray looked at the stat sheet. He's like 28 shots for MPJ. That's a lot, but I mean, MPJ still had a great night. He's had a great season, so I've got him in there over Norm Powell. Like I don't know. The Heat had a pretty good start to the season, I guess, but they've really kind of fallen off for me over the last month or so, really since Christmas and maybe even a little bit before that. So I went with MPJ over Norm Powell, and then I went with Embiid over Cat. I mean, obviously, there's probably going to be a little bit of bias for me because I still watch the Sixers a lot as somebody who grew up in the area, grew up like rooting for the Sixers. I just think what Joel has done is pretty remarkable, and I don't think it's similarly like with Phoenix in the West. I think what the Sixers have been doing is not really talked about enough. Most notably the Embiid thing, because obviously Tyrese Maxey's been awesome all season, is kind of a fringe MVP candidate, given some of the injuries that we've had so far this year. For guys that aren't going to be eligible for that award. But Joel's just been awesome. I mean, he had his first 40-point game of the season last week. I think he's had 30 in a bunch of games in a row. His playmaking has been great. The defense obviously is not what it used to be when he was arguably the best defensive player, or a guy that should have been up for defensive player of the year, in my opinion, in the early part of this decade, and even earlier in his career as well. He's not that level of defensive player anymore, just doesn't have the same lift, and really isn't just in general, just doesn't have the ability to be the same impactful defender. But I think just him kind of being there, he's still going to have some kind of impact, but it's not the same level that he used to be. But he's kind of back to the same scoring self. And I know he's actually been pretty available too, outside of not playing it back in one half of a back-to-back. He's really hasn't missed a lot of games, especially recently. In January as a whole, I thought he was excellent. You can go Cat for sure. I wouldn't begrudge anybody who wants to get a second member of the Knicks on the All-Star team over the Sixers because they simply have a better record. I don't disagree with that at all, but I just think what Embiid's been doing, I think he's been super, super impactful, and I think the Sixers have needed it as well. And now they're going to need it even more with Paul George, this wacky suspension, as the Sixers continue to be the Sixers with weird things happening for them at all times. So with that, that's with my 24 All-Stars, though, I did have 15 17 15 American players and 9 international players. I couldn't do math there for a second. So we have to get to the 16 American players limit. And that's where I think you could put LeBron in. Like, if you have some of this, you can quibble with some of the guys. Like, you put Cat in over Embiid, and you could put Cat on the world team as well. Because he's played for the Dominican Republic in international stuff before. And if you have, Denny Avdia over Alperen Şengün, that also kind of keeps the math the same. But I think you have to have Kawhi in there. And then if you need an extra American player to make the numbers work, Adam Silver can put LeBron James in the game because it wouldn't be All-Star Weekend without LeBron James, although it was All-Star Weekend without LeBron James last year because he decided not to go and participate. But regardless, I just think that would be an easy solution there, and it would be a way to get Kawhi in the game. I think that would be because I think mostly because he's deserving, but it would be interesting because the Clippers are hosting the All-Star game at Intuit Dome next weekend, even despite all the aspiration stuff and that ongoing scandal that we haven't really had a resolution from. But anyway, regardless, I think that's kind of how I would do the All-Star thing. And there's my 24 players, and then the 25th, because you need an extra American player, would be LeBron James. So that's how I would do it. We're gonna wrap up the show today talking a little bit about some college hoops takeaways. Got to start in Lawrence, Kansas, because of the epic battle between Kansas and BYU, and most notably Darryn Peterson and AJ Dybantsa, the two of the top 3 players, or most people would have one of these guys at number 1 on the draft big boards. I know for sure who I have. We'll talk about that in the coming weeks and months, especially from a Jazz perspective as we get closer to the lottery and the draft as a whole in the summer. But BYU suffers the back-to-back losses. They obviously lost. We talked about the loss to Arizona last week when we had Adam Green on the show to talk about the Wildcats. Kansas came out hot. Darryn Peterson was awesome in the 20 minutes he played, mostly in the first half there. 18 points on 8 shots, ridiculous efficiency, just a ridiculous player all around. And AJ Dybantsa struggled to kind of get going, to get his shot. He finished with 17 points on 12 shots, made a couple threes, but didn't get to the free throw line nearly as much as he has been at times this season. And BYU just did not have enough firepower to overcome a Kansas team that's kind of been surging lately. Like, it wasn't just Darryn Peterson who played about half the game and was dealing with some more injury stuff, but Like Bryson Tiller was awesome for KU, Melvin Council, Trey White, Floyd Badunga. They had all 5 starters in double figures. So not a bad loss for BYU by any stretch of me. It's going to Allen Fieldhouse and losing, but this is just kind of what the Big 12 is, and BYU's learning that despite how good they are. I think they'll have a chance to get back on track this week. They're at Oklahoma State, I think, on Wednesday. Then they have Houston at home on Saturday, which is going to be maybe the game of the weekend. Before they've got some more winnable games the following week against Baylor and Colorado, and then they go to Arizona for the return trip to Tucson after that epic game in Provo last Monday, which obviously we've talked about. So. Wrap up by talking about Colorado because I got to go to that game, see that game in person. Buffs blow the doors off TCU. I was kind of blown away by how good they played. And Tad Boyle was saying after the game, he was even thinking to himself on the sidelines while he was watching, man, where's this team been all season? Because they obviously started 2-0 in Big 12 play, lost 6 straight. Some ranked losses in there. Some ones you're not they're not bad losses. Some of them by any stretch of the beans. There are games they could have won, against the Kansas or a Texas Tech at home. Or UCF as well was a winnable game. They dropped at home, but nice to see them get back on track. They made a little bit of a starting lineup change with 4 freshmen starting alongside junior point guard Barrington Hargress. But I thought the guys that are typically starters like Sebastian Ronchik and Bengat Dak came off the bench, played their usual amount of minutes, and played pretty well. Isaiah Johnson played well again. Despite teams still really adjusting to him now and not trying to take him away as a scorer. TCU was blitzing the heck out of every ball screen that he was put in. That he was trying to run with him as the distributor. Still finished 16 points, but had 5 assists, which was nice to see. So this is a big week for the Buffs, to be honest. Not like they're 3-6 now in Big 12 play. They go at Baylor on Wednesday, which is a winnable game. Baylor's really struggled this year. Then they've got Arizona State at home on Saturday, a game I'll be at. So a chance to get 2 more wins here. And then if you get to 5-6 in Big 12 play, that's pretty good for this group, especially with the gauntlet that's coming later this month. They've got a week where they go both to play at Texas Tech and BYU in the same week, which is not going to be fun at all. They've obviously got to go to Houston at the end of the month, and then Arizona comes to Boulder for the final game of the regular season in early March. So it'll be interesting to see what the Buffs can do. I mean, they've already matched last year's win total in the Big 12 with 3, which they got on the last day of the regular season last year against TCU, ironically. But now I think there's a chance for them to get 6, 7, maybe even 8 wins if they really can go on a run here and win the games that are not playing a ranked team on the road, to be honest with you. They've got some winnable games against at home against Oklahoma State, Kansas State later in the month. They play at Utah, at Baylor. Like I said, this week is a winnable game. Arizona State as well. So that's all I got for today's episode. We'll be talking more college hoops later in the week for sure. Probably a Mountain West focused episode later in the week because some teams are playing really, really well, like Grand Canyon and New Mexico. Wyoming got a big win over CSU the other day, who's really, really struggling. So that's why we haven't talked about them as much. But we'll have a Mountain West focused episode later in the week here, and then get back to talking NBA again next week leading into the All-Star break and after the trade deadline as well, which is on Thursday this week in the NBA. Not expecting too many huge moves for either of the 3 teams here in the Mountain Time Zone. I think the Nuggets, if anything, they might just kind of shed some salary. Phoenix is probably going to stand pat because they've had so much good vibes and you don't really want to mess with what they've got going on right now. In Utah, maybe they're part of a 3-team trade kind of thing, helping some other teams out and maybe a bigger deal. We'll see, but nothing too significant I'm expecting, at least for the 3 teams in the Mountain Time Zone. But so that'll do it for today's episode. Appreciate everybody who was tuned in and listening. Make sure to subscribe wherever you do so, whether that's on Apple or Spotify. Make sure to subscribe there. Leave a 5-star review. Leave a comment on Spotify, which you can do as well. Or if you prefer to watch all the episodes on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to my channel at @King_Tyler B. Leave a like on the video. Leave a comment. All that stuff helps me get it out there to more people and helps me grow the show, which is obviously the goal here. So thanks again for watching and listening, and enjoy the week of basketball.